Hello, and welcome to the Redesign podcast. This is our third episode, and today we'll be looking at how marketing can be sustainable, responsible, and ethical. A few days ago, I had the chance to speak with Sabina Harnau. She is striving, in her own words, to build the most sustainable copywriting agency on earth, from scratch. And as it happened, we recorded this episode on no other day than Black Friday. One of those days in a year where the overconsumption crisis of our times is taken to an extreme. So, what is wrong with marketing, and how could it be ethical? And don't the words ethical and marketing contradict each other? I hope that you'll enjoy this episode and Sabina's vibrant way and open way of bringing her thoughts across. So let's begin and welcome Sabina. Okay. Hello, Sabina.
Hello, Annegret. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Thanks to you. A few weeks ago, I heard for the first time about From Scratch. And with that, I, of course, also heard about you and about the ethical move. And I would like to ask you, who are you?
That's a great question. Who am I and how many? Right? That's a book title in our native country of Germany. So I am an ethical copywriter by trade. I am, in my personal life, a crazy cat woman. I have also got 2 dogs. I'm an expat who's lived in a number of countries. I've not lived in Germany for nearly 11 years now. I'm a school teacher by training and a linguist as a passion, and also a knitter by passion. So you'll usually find me with some yarn and some needles in my free time. So it's a lot of things, but really for work, what I do is I write copy with a focus on conversion copy. I lead a small team of, we're now 6 people at From Scratch, writing copy, mostly in English and German. And I'm also responsible for learning and development at The Ethical Move, which is a social movement for ethical marketing and sales. And we're looking to change the way we sell.
Ethical marketing and sales. What is that?
Fortunately, we've just renewed our pledge, so it's easier for me now to put this in concise language. Ethical marketing really puts the person first. So the person comes before the sale. We're not looking to sell something at any cost. We're looking to sell something that's really going to be a great fit for the person that we're selling to. And it's not self-serving. It's really from a place of service. And hopefully also serving not just the customer, but also serving the greater good.
And how do you get to know what is good for that person?
Well, you need to get to know the person. It's very difficult to say that in a sweeping fashion. Yeah. And I think that's also really what drives all good marketing, which is where ethical marketing and good marketing can be the same in many cases. The best marketing is really targeted, and the company behind it, or in some cases, the service provider or solopreneur, they really know their target audience and what they're looking for and what their problems are, what their desires are, and they match their services or their offers to the target audience. So it's not like, let's create a product that we think is cool, and then let's see whether there's anyone out there who wants it. No, it's the other way around. We identify that there's a need for X, Y, and Z, and we know what people are looking for this, and so we build it for them in order to help them live a better life or do better work or whatever.
Oh, very nice. How did you get into ethical marketing? I assume that you started with more traditional marketing maybe, and then at some point you had a big reveal and you thought, no, this is not the way it should go. Something must be wrong with marketing here.
No, my story is actually quite different. I used to be a grammar school teacher. And so what I knew about marketing was mainly knowledge marketing. I think teachers are marketeers as well. They market knowledge and learning to children, and in my case, young adults. And they are the less likely group of people when it comes to picking up new information voluntarily. You really have to do hard work for some topics to get them across and to get people passionate about it. But one of the topics that I taught was advertising and marketing. My subjects are English and German, and so as part of the curriculum I had to cover those, and that was very different from what you would find in a marketing department. It's very critical. It's looking at the strategies, the tactics, the rhetorical devices used in marketing and advertising, and how companies create desire and get us to buy something or get us to change behavior, with the aim of helping young people to also guard themselves against it. So it's not just, let's all learn how to be good marketers. It's like, when you see advertising, you need to know how it works so you can protect yourself from manipulation. So I was really critical of marketing and advertising at that point. And then I changed careers by going into consumer service. This was because I changed countries, and it was, I was flexible with what I wanted to work in. I just wanted to do something with language and with people. And so I ended up writing for consumer services and defining brand tone of voice for consumer service in several languages. I was fortunate to have that job at the Lego Group, where I think marketing is done from a good place, and the conversation is always really respectful of the people who play with Lego toys. So this was a great place to have my first experiences. I was still really critical of marketing, like even within consumer, like there's a way of looking at marketing that can be quite siloed. And I think I fell into the trap in the beginning of thinking, okay, we are serving consumers here in consumer service, and there are these marketing people, and they're really looking to sell them more stuff. And maybe, that's not always the same goal as we have in consumer service. So I was still critical, but I was warming up to it. And I was starting to see examples also within Lego at the time of how consumer service is actually really important for doing marketing well, because there's a shared core really to it. If marketing is done well, it looks to help people, like what I said about ethical marketing. And that warmed me up a little bit for the topic. And then I worked in an agency where I got to write a lot of sales copy, also for service channels, partly like phone lines and stuff. But it broadened my mind and my horizon. And after a time working agency side, I discovered that, there are a few bad apples out there, probably more than a few bad apples in the corporate sector, where you have marketing and sales teams that really want to push the message no matter what. Like, you've got people breaking down with their cars, waiting for roadside assistance. And instead of helping them as quickly as possible, some insurance companies back then chose to let people listen to a 90-minute recording on the phone that was kind of using green sleeves, the old-fashioned music that comes with a lot of phone systems, and then switch that up with sales messages, which is kind of the thing that you don't want to listen to when you're in the pouring rain, your car's broken, you might have had a small accident or a big one, and you're waiting for someone to come and pick you up. And I found that really pushy and unethical. And after a while, I didn't want to do that anymore. And I also didn't want to help sell any products and services anymore that I thought weren't really helping the world. And so that's when I decided to start my own company. Because
and that
at
is
the
why
time
it's
I felt...
from scratch, or?
Partly, yes. I attended a training session with 26, which is a fantastic association of people in the UK mainly, but really globally, who work with language or who just love language and want people to appreciate words and the power of language more. And there was a training session called Marketing for Copywriters. And I was a copywriter at the time. I wanted to learn how to market copywriting, but I wasn't even certain that I wanted to be self-employed or be a freelancer yet. But I discovered during that session that I did want to do my own thing. And the name From Scratch came about during an exercise where we were being asked to create like a mind map of all the kinds of things that define us or define our work. And I discovered, there's even playing with Lego bricks. You build something up from nothing. I had changed career a couple of times, basically starting from nothing. I changed countries, again, starting up from nothing. I love cooking from scratch. I like making things, just really as much out of nothing as possible. And then we had to define what's the common denominator and put that in the middle of the mind map. And for me, that was from scratch. And then somebody, Heather, who ended up being my mentor, said, oh, that would be a great brand name if you were to go freelance. And I'm like, let's do it.
Oh my God.
That's really funny. Yeah, that was, I still remember the day. 3 months later, I had basically started the company and everything. I was still, when I got started, I was like, oh, we're going to do a lot of things from scratch, not just copy, we're also going to make jam, and we're going to make like Christmas tree ornaments or like whatever. But yeah, my passion is really copywriting. So I don't know, I would get up for making jam every morning. It's just not as important to me.
Very nice story, super good. But yeah, obviously, as a from scratch sounds like you want to start copywriting from scratch, right? Also from nothing in the sense. But that also brings me to the point, like, what is wrong with marketing then? Like, what is it that you see is really bad that is happening out there?
Well, where do I start? There's a lot of great marketing. Like, obviously, there's fantastic marketing, and there are lots of rewards and prizes, and they exist for a reason. But those are like really the shining stars of the industry. A lot of the everyday marketing that we come into contact with, be it through just browsing the internet or receiving newsletters, or sometimes also through people who reach out to us for help. There's a lot of ready-made models and formulas and 10-step checklists that worked for somebody, and then that somebody claims that it will work for everybody. And a lot of people follow that logic and think it must also apply to them. And then if it's not working, they think something's wrong with them. So that's something I observe. And today is Black Friday, and I see that happening also with the Black Friday messaging. Right? From Scratch works mostly in the eco space and the social justice space. And so a lot of the companies that we would work with, or the space that we're in, they're really critical of Black Friday and of overconsumption and driving that overconsumption with additional promotions and giving discounts and stuff. But it's difficult for companies to shake off the logic. So even eco-friendly and social brands still do promotions today. And I find that some of them are just renaming it from Black Friday into Green Friday because their products are green. And I just think that doesn't work. They
still stimulate consumption.
Yes. And even to the point where I think, it's obviously better if you offer a deal where for everything that's being bought, you make a donation or something like that. But still, that doesn't solve the problem of overconsumption. You're still driving people to buy more than they would have done. And they feel better about their overconsumption because you're doing something to kind of offset it. The question is, can you really offset overproduction and overconsumption by planting trees or something? I would argue that possibly not. So for me, a really Green Friday would mean, how can we make sure that people don't buy more this weekend?
Switch it all off.
A bit
put the
like,
website down.
Well, that's maybe a bit extreme, but a couple of years ago, well, I think actually quite a few years ago now, 10 years ago, I don't know, Patagonia did this ad where they said, don't buy this jacket. I mean, it ended up selling jackets because the jacket really said, the jacket's fantastic. And of course, people took note of Patagonia through the ad. But the main message was, wear your stuff for as long as you can, use your gear for as long as you can, get stuff repaired and so on. So what I would really like to see is more creativity in that way. Maybe even something like when we're talking about apparel, show us show us the item in your wardrobe that's oldest from our brand, and we'll reward you according to how long you've been wearing it. And if it's broken, we'll repair it for you free of charge, something like that, just to change the way we look at promotions. I mean, it doesn't have to be a discount off a new item. It could be any other way of creating loyalty and a good feeling and more of a relationship with the brand, which will of course pay off in the future. It's just more long-term.
It's a more long-term planning in the sense, right? You don't have the short-term revenue from the higher sales, but so it sounds like you really find yourself in a tension space there, right? Like, because then you have the demand or the ask from your client, which does not necessarily sit with your own values. How do you then approach this conversation with the client? And let's say a client asks you to market their Green Friday initiative.
We've been fortunate. Nobody's asked us. Maybe it's because, like, I mean, to be completely honest with you, I'm not doing anything to attract Green Friday deals. I think if somebody were to come and say, can you help us come up with something creative and write the copy for us for next November, we wouldn't say no to that. But we don't really talk about these promos. We very rarely do anything like for the holidays or for like Mother's Day or anything like that. Very, very rarely. Partly because we work really foundationally with our clients. So we look at, how does your product lineup actually match what your customers want? What you know about them? What should your messaging be? What kind of promos can you do with them that would fit them and that would resonate without you having to push it so hard? How can you create that relationship so people stick around for longer? So you can also, because the most expensive thing is always winning new customers. If you can sell more for a longer period to the same people, it's going to be a much smarter investment. So that's mainly what we work on. And then rebrands and website copy plays a big role. So those things are usually more long-term investments and not so short-term. But so when a client comes and wants us to help them increase sales, yes, we don't say no to that, but it also depends on the client. We don't work with clients whose products and services we don't want to promote. It has to be something where we feel like this is a really good fit.
Right. So we talked a bit about the green part of your marketing approach, let's say, but you also mentioned social justice as a second one. And I'm curious, how does that to shape out?
It's an interesting question. I think it depends a lot on the client's brand and their team, and also where they're based. We work in English and German, and I noticed that the debate is quite different between the English-speaking markets and the German-speaking markets, where especially in German, we now have debates over gendered language that are partly so aggressive to a point where I can't really say I've observed as much anger about the non-binary they in the English language when you compare it to what we call a gender asterisk or similar signage in German. German is just a different language. You have to show grammatical gender, and so it's difficult for people to match that to non-binary lifestyles or gender expression. So that's a big one. And then also diversity in terms of ethnicity and what role that plays is culturally really different. Even how you deal with cultural diversity, how open certain workplaces are about that versus how much it's covered up. So the most difficult thing, or the most interesting challenge, I would say, is to match the work that we do to the workplace culture of the client. So it feels like a good stretch and not like something that's way out of reach for them. Because also everyone who works at the company needs to be able to look at the company website or whatever's being put out there and feel like they can own that.
Yeah. Taking the example of the gender asterisk in German, since I'm also German myself, I'm very aware of this problem. And I also know there's a lot of discussions now. Which one do we pick now? Like, do we now write all our company language with the asterisk, or do we choose in mentioning both the female and the male version? But then you still haven't covered non-binary options, obviously. How do you navigate such conversations to come to, do you try to come to a consensus, or how do you bring people around the table to find their language in there?
Well, I prefer to look at our role as a facilitator of the conversation rather than someone who makes a decision on behalf of the company, because that's not our role. Like, we aren't in a position to say, this is our prescription. Like, we're not doctors, right? We're not looking to save someone's life. And it's better, from my point of view, it's better if the company goes a step in the direction of inclusion and diversity, and celebrating also in the space of gender, celebrating diversity, than going too far, being at, you know, the most progressive point there could be, and then having to retract from that. I think that would be very sad. So it's more important for me to carry along as many people as possible and create an awareness and help people to understand why the debate's even happening, and developing some empathy for that, than to say, you all have to write this way. And there are so many debates still in linguistics as well, whether or not it's even possible to fully genderize or degenderize, if you will, the German language, just because of how it's built. And the last thing I'll say is there's a really, really useful tool on the internet called geschicktgendern.de. So the people behind that are creating like a gender dictionary where you can look up one of the terms that you might want to use, and then you find gender-friendly replacement terminology for that. And they don't rely on anything like asterisks or having a female and a male form, or a feminine and a masculine form. It's really clever the way they use language to get around these things. And once we bring in that kind of language, usually people open up to it more, because it's a third way.
That is super interesting. You mentioned the point that like language is something that is alive, right? Language is constantly changing. And I often think, especially international English is such a fast changing, somewhat language in its own, right? Because it's not native British, it's not native American, etc. But like, how do you see your role in playing in there? Like, do you find yourself, let's say, an actor who actively forms the language to progress, or do you find yourself more as a person who uses what's happening out there? So how do you see yourself in that?
That's such a good question. Oh my goodness. Probably a little bit of both. I don't think that I can be someone who shapes language without responding to what I see and hear happening. But I can give more weight. I can give a push or a nudge to certain types of language that I find worth spreading. A bit like TED, spreading ideas worth spreading. So as spreading language, that's worth spreading. And with a view to international English, I find that particularly interesting. There's that misconception that if you're not US American or Canadian or British, Australian, or from New Zealand, then you're probably not a native speaker. And I really struggle with that. It leads to all sorts of discrimination, which leads us back to, you know, inclusive copywriting. For me, inclusive copywriting also means understanding that people from, let's say, India, Pakistan, Nigeria, Kenya, they are native speakers. They use English as an official language of the country. It might not be the Queen's English, or it might not be, you know, Midwestern American English, but it is a viable, valid kind of English. And so the question we need to ask is their English malleable enough to cover the kinds of target audiences that we need to reach? Are they able to change the way they write according to their audience, or not? And if not, do they represent the target audience that we want to reach? And then it really doesn't matter anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you want to write to an audience in let's say Nigeria, why not use a Nigerian copywriter for that? And I'm sure, a lot of people that I've met from those places, which are not considered typical English-speaking places, they've done so much training. They've read all the books. They watch the same movies. They listen to music. They are able to write like if you don't look at the name, you don't know. And I think that's where we need to be very conscious of very subtle kind of racism seeping into even which freelancer you're going to task with the job. I've seen it many times, or paying them less because they live in a cheaper, and I'm doing air quotes here, in a cheaper country. If they do the same level of work as somebody from New York, why not pay them the same rates as somebody from New York?
Very, very interesting point. Yeah, I can totally see that. We spoke about the diversity in teams up front, and also how easy or difficult it is to recruit people, to increase, let's say, the spectrum of a team. It's not always as easy. It depends where you are and so forth. But either way, that's another story.
Yeah.
I would like to ask you maybe to share a success story or something where you see ethical copywriting is going really well. Maybe something you did yourself or something you see out there, something that people can maybe look up after listening.
So ethical copywriting going really well. I think there's a lot of ethical copywriting that almost goes unnoticed. We don't, most people don't check, is this ethical? Is this not ethical? But I would, instead of telling a success story, I just want to encourage anyone listening to check when you come to a website, you read an email or a flyer or whatever it is that wants to advertise something to you. Is it convincing you in a really overt way where it's telling you, look, we're great and here's why? Or are they manipulating you? Are they making you feel bad for not choosing them? Are they playing to your darkest thoughts and beliefs? A lot of bad copywriting, or good copywriting, but from my point of view, unethical copywriting works with the 7 deadly sins. So it looks to increase your gluttony, for example, or your pride, or things that actually separate you from other people and make you feel superior, perhaps, or in some way they don't bring out the best in you. And I would like to see many more companies actually playing to virtues instead of sins. I'm not a religious person. I'm using that as a metaphor, right? It's just part of the cultural heritage we have. But so that's what I would check for. And I'm sure you'll find that a lot of the copy that you find quite effective, or products you love, that they actually already use copy to convince you rather than just to persuade or manipulate you. And that for me is a really good benchmark.
I see that you go with a lot of very good intentions in your conversations with clients, most likely. But do you see that going wrong sometimes? Do you see that sometimes your efforts are not being respected or received well? Maybe do you have an example?
Yes, it does happen. The saddest part of our work is when we, spend sometimes months with a company, helping them to refine their message and coming up with a content strategy that really works for people at different levels of awareness, from I've never even thought about this problem to I've heard that there's a solution for my problem, but I don't know which one to choose, to the point where they're like, if you now give me, at this point, if you give me 10% off, I'm definitely going to buy, and I'm going to recommend you to all the people I know who've also got this problem. So we work on this and we come up with strategy and reports, and we write the copy for them. And then it's up to the client to implement this. And then they don't implement it.
Oh.
That's the saddest part of our work. And I'm still understanding why it happens. I think I'm probably never going to finish that journey of discovery of why that keeps happening. It's not like it's happening all the time. It's not like 90% of our clients never implement the copy, but it happens, I would say, probably once, twice a year. So regularly enough for us to notice. And of course, it's completely up to them. But at that point, usually there's no communication anymore. And sometimes there was great enthusiasm when we delivered the copy, and everyone was like, yeah, let's get this started, right? And we could tell that nobody was faking it. There was no real concern. And then at some point, something must have happened, or there was something like, one thing that I've discovered is there's a level of a feeling of a queasy feeling. Like, it's scary. It's different from what we've done before. We feel like we're, this is like taking a big leap into the future. And so that's really my question of discovery for the next year or so, to find out, how can we support that, and how can we hold hands during that period of implementation when everything feels scary. Yeah,
very nice. Maybe half related to this, in a sense, like not everybody has the possibility, let's say financially or out of other reasons, to involve a copywriter, so somebody with a lot of experience on the project. And then this fear might be even more personal in that moment, because then some people need to take on that role without actually having that expertise themselves. So for instance, as a designer, maybe that creates the interfaces, and then you do need text on those interfaces, right? And if you're not having the luxury of a copywriter on your team, most of the time the designers are actually filling the gaps there. What is it that you would recommend people like that, people that have to write copy without necessarily having the expertise behind?
That's a great question. I think there are a few different things that you could do in that scenario. So one thing, and I'm just going to be really self-serving here, subscribe to our newsletter. Read our blog. It's free. And I'm saying this off the feedback that we've received from people, like especially designers, who found us and said, like, this was really helpful to me. I'm able to do a better job based on your blog and based on your newsletter. Otherwise, I wouldn't say that. And this is my advertising spot over, basically. The other thing you can do is, read copywriting books, hang out with copywriters, join copywriting communities. There are plenty of them free of charge on various different platforms, like for example, Facebook. I know a lot of people are moving away from Facebook, but it's still a place to find community. Some happen on LinkedIn as well. So if you follow copywriters on LinkedIn, they usually put out really good content. It's advertising for them, and you can learn from it.
That's true.
Join conferences. They're usually affordable, kind of affordable. Like, for example, Pro Copywriters in the UK, they do an annual conference that's I don't actually know what the price was last time, but I think it's definitely below 500 euros. And a lot of workplaces would be much more ready to pay for a conference experience for 500 euros, where you get the recordings and everything afterwards as well, rather than having to pay thousands potentially for a copywriter. So learn as much about copywriting as you can. And then there's always the option of going for copy coaching, which is also something a lot of copywriters offer. We offer it too. And editing. So, if all else fails, get a good editor, and they will be able to iron out the copy you've written. But yeah, there's a bit of sometimes I notice, I don't know how it happened, but there's sometimes this wedge between designers and copywriters. And one of the things that I'm really keen to do is remove that wedge and get to a better way of collaborating.
I really appreciate that personally. I really love sitting together with a copywriter in that. It's just making everything so much better. You see how you can target a lot better your audience in there, because language is a whole other set that adds to the experience.
Yeah, and a lot of copywriters say, you can build the most beautiful website or app, but if there are no words on there, you won't know what to do with it. I would also argue, you can write a beautiful piece of copy if it's in a Word document with no layout whatsoever. Nobody's going to want to read it. So we do need each other. And the most successful advertisement has always been created by art directors or designers and copywriters together. It's always the result of collaboration.
Collaboration, right? What's the one thing that you would like to have our listeners remember from this conversation?
It's possible to do things ethically and successfully at the same time.
Very nice. Thanks a lot, Sabine. I would like to leave it at this.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Very happy. Thanks a lot for your time. This was a great pleasure.
Yes, for me too. Thank you too, Annegret. And yeah, thanks for listening as well.
Thank you.